What's up everybody, welcome back or welcome if you're new. In today's video, we're going to be talking about a 6-month review on the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6. Change doesn't have to be bad, especially in the mobile phone industry. Enter the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6. That's right, this is a phone that turns into a tablet or a tablet that turns into a phone. I'm going to go and state this right now that this folding phone or this folding tablet is not what you think. So in my personal opinion, the smartphone industry has kind of stagnated. I used to be one of those people who was ready to jump onto the next smartphone because typically those smartphones had some type of leaps and bounds and some type of technology with huge camera gains or huge battery gains, better processors. Gone are the days where I get super excited about a smartphone that really just kind of blows my mind. And that's why I decided to go with the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6. While you can see here that it is a candy bar type phone, it is actually a phone that opens up into a tablet. If you're not familiar with the Z Fold series from Samsung, they actually started this phone series a few years ago, and they've just kind of been improving it ever since. So I'm not gonna lie, I am a Samsung fanboy. I have Samsung refrigerator and washer and dryer, tablet, watches, and the smartphone, but I'm not gonna lie and say that this is the best phone out there. Mainly because it feels like Samsung has really just been nickeling and diming a lot of their Fold series consumers for about the last 2 or 3 years. So before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's go and talk about the dimensions and specs of this phone. If you're not familiar with the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6, it is Samsung's 6th iteration of folding phones. They actually have 2 types of folding phones. They have the folding phone that is the Z Fold 6, where it's kind of like it opens up like a book, like so. And then they have the Samsung Z Flip series, which is going to be more like the old phones we used to have back in the 90s, if you remember those, and it kind of closes from top to bottom. So the Z Flip series is more on the traditional side in the sense that it opens up to a normal candy bar slab phone, whereas the Z Fold series opens up to be a tablet. So the Z Fold 6 is going to have an inner display of 7.6 inches, whereas the outer display is going to have a 6.3-inch display. And so a lot of people are going to state that the outer screen is either 1, perfect for one-hand usability, or 2, too narrow because of one-handed usability. I personally am not a fan of the narrow front screen, even though the design language of the Z Fold 6 really helps to make it as easy as possible to get used to that narrow screen. The Samsung Z Fold 6 has 5 cameras. There's going to be 3 on the back, 1 on the front, and then 1 under display camera over here. And so you're not actually able to see it because it's hidden, but the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6 will have a under display camera for the tablet portion. Which leads me to state that these cameras are good, but they're not great. Considering how much this Z Fold 6 cost, I was really hoping that Samsung was going to really up the camera game. However, we didn't get that. And so that's another thing I don't necessarily like about my Z Fold 6 is the fact that these cameras on the back, they're about 2 years old now. And I mean, really, again, for the price point Samsung, you need to be giving the Z Fold series its flagship cameras. The front screen, albeit narrow, functions as if it's going to be a normal smartphone. And you're able to do text messages, you're able to do your YouTube, your Instagram, whatever, all within the front screen. But again, you just have to keep in mind that it's a narrow front screen. So you're not going to be able to get the regular media consumption aspect ratio as if you're going to be using Samsung's other phones like the S24 Ultra or the iPhone whatever Pro Max. And so I would have to say that the outer screen is 100% usable, but because it's so narrow, when you're like doing things like typing or texting, you're actually going to be somewhat like a demigod of typos because the narrow screen, your thumbs are kind of competing with each other. But once you open up the phone like this, your world just kind of changes because you went from having a very narrow front screen to an entire tablet in your pockets. So the display on the inner screen is going to be 6.7 inches, and it's going to feature what Samsung calls as ultra thin glass. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the ultra thin glass because I feel like it's sometimes a gimmick, but ultimately you're not actually typing on glass. You are typing on glass, but there is a plastic screen protector on top of a plastic screen on top of the ultra thin glass. And so that glass feeling that you get whenever you're typing on a traditional smartphone is kind of absent whenever you're typing on the inner display of the Z Fold series. Each of the two screens, be that the outer or the inner screen, are going to have a refresh rate of up to 120 Hz, which means that you're really going to see the smooth animations and smooth kind of scrolling effects whenever you are just using your phone. Not like some of those other phones that limit you to 60 frames per second. Apple. One of the coolest things about the two displays, both the inner and outer screen, is that their home screens are independent of each other. So if you're going to be using the outer display of this phone all the time, you could have your home screen set to be something that's optimized for your workflow or your personal usage. But then whenever you are stationary and then you open your phone, then you could see that this is going to be an entirely different home screen from your outer home screen. And the home screens don't have to be independent. You can actually have the home screens mirror each other, but I do like the fact that I can have kind of my business side on the outside and then my personal side on the inside whenever I am using my phone. So now let's talk about the inner screen and the crease. I personally hate this thing. It is annoying. It catches the eye, and like whenever I'm watching YouTube or Netflix or whenever I'm playing Pokemon Go, this crease here is just in the way. It does take a few days or a few weeks to get used to it, but even after you get used to it, at least from my personal experience, I always feel it and just kind of get annoyed with it. And that's another thing that I'm not a huge fan about the Z Fold series, is the fact that there is a crease. I know how Samsung has made some major movement towards reducing the crease iteration after iteration, but I guess for me, my OCD just says, I know there's a crease there, I can see the crease, and it just kind of gets on my nerves. Now, continuing on with hardware, the Samsung Galaxy only has one port, which is going to be the USB-C charging port. Another gripe that I have about this Samsung Z Fold series is the fact that this is not the fastest charging that the Samsung phones have ever seen. This actually charges at, I think, 23 watts, and that's actually pretty slow in 2024 when this phone was released. On the right-hand side, there is going to be some volume rockers right here, as well as the power button, which doubles down as a fingerprint reader. I have no qualms with those. I actually like the physical fingerprint reader and just kind of where the placement is for the volume. On the top there, we have a little bit of a speaker. Same thing at the bottom. We have the USB-C and a speaker grill again. And then we have the thing that makes this device a folding phone or a folding tablet, is going to be the hinge. So the hinge here is actually really narrow. The camera doesn't actually do it justice to show how narrow this hinge is, but I mean, it's about the width of a number 2 wooden pencil. It's very narrow, and Samsung, just at a design standpoint, minus the narrow front screen, knocks it out of the park. With the hinge, the Samsung phones can enter what they call flex mode. And flex mode is essentially just allowing the phone to bend and kind of flex to whatever angle. So if you want it to be at a really, really acute angle, you could go and have it like that for whatever reason. And then if you wanted to have it at a really obtuse angle, again, you can have like that for, again, whatever reason. And the hardware and software really play together, because if you're watching YouTube or Netflix or whatever, you can actually have the phone in flex mode, and then you're able to have it somewhat like a stand for your phone, so that way you can consume your media, or even a tripod if you're using your Z Fold 6 for its camera. When the fold is open, you can actually see how narrow it is. And so here is a pile of Post-it notes, and you can see here that the phone and the Post-it notes are almost the same width. And that's one thing that I love about the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6, is its thinness. Now that may lead you to think, well, Derek, you have a folding device and it's thin. Is it fragile? The answer is mostly no. Obviously, because of the fact that it's a folding phone, there are going to be more vulnerabilities to breakage than a traditional phone. However, Samsung has really done a number with just making this feel premium, as well as being durable. So now let's go and talk about the performance and the software of this phone. First off, let's start off with performance. This phone doesn't last as long as it needs to be. It has a 4,000 something milliamp hour battery in here, and it's okay at best. If Samsung had really put a fast charger in this phone, as well as maybe a larger battery, this phone would just be my favorite phone. But I find that after I charge my phone to 100% and then I just use it with regular conference calls and media consumption and pictures and whatnot, at around 7 p.m., I'm at 19%, and then I had to charge up again. So it does technically have all-day battery because of the fact that I work from home. However, if I was going to be out and about and I was going to be on a subway or a train station, or if I'm just going to be out and about in Seattle downtown proper, I honestly think that I would have to have a battery charger in order to get me through my day. I would really like if Samsung could put a larger battery in here, so that way I could have at least one full battery without having to worry about having to charge up around 7 or 8 p.m. The thing that I really like about this Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6 is the weight. It comes in at 239 grams, and it's pretty light considering that it's a phone and a tablet that fits in your pockets. So now let's talk about the software of this phone. If you've ever used any type of other Samsung device out there with Samsung Galaxy One UI, this is pretty much the same thing. The only difference is the fact that you are able to do a lot more multitasking. So for instance, here you can see that I have my sister's YouTube account showing how she does her craft work, and then on the other side, I'm multitasking that shows that I am trying to catch a Pokemon from Pokemon Go. And that's where the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6 multitasking really just rocks my world. The fact that I'm able to watch my YouTube on one screen and then play games on the other screen, it really just kind of saves me time because I don't have to switch from one app to another and then back to the original app and then back to the other app. It's all just there within one screen. And you can actually choose different types of formats and how you want to do your multitasking. So for instance here, I have again my sister's YouTube channel that's showing me how to do her art craft. And then you can see here that at the bottom, I have my Brawl Stars game. And so I'm able to do my media consumption as well as play my games all within one screen. And I can play that in either portrait mode or landscape mode. Continuing on with the software of One UI is going to be the fact that I can have the outer screen display one thing. I could just be using a normal app, and then whenever I open it up, you can see that it goes from a narrow screen and then it just opens up into a larger screen. So here you can see that I have Spotify playing, and it's going to reflect the same thing as what I would see on the outer screen, but in a more larger display. Now, this phone, even though it does fold and it seems like there's a lot of vulnerabilities, is IP48 rated. So if you're not familiar with that, that means that this phone can actually be dumped into some water without you really having to worry. Mind you, that is fresh water. And then also it is going to be dust resistant or debris resistant. So that way any type of debris that tries to enter the hinge is going to be somewhat protected. Samsung does state that you shouldn't be putting your devices near water or sandy conditions, but if you so happen to be in that situation where you accidentally trip and fall into a puddle or a pool, you are mostly going to be okay. So the phone itself is not that fragile. There's a whole bunch of people out there on YouTube who do tests of things like that. I'm not going to do that because I actually use this phone on a daily basis. But if, let's say, I broke the outer screen, let's say I dropped it, or my cat Emmy decides to knock it off of the counter or whatever, the outer display is going to be broken. Sure. But then that means I could be using the inner display. And so vice versa. If I, for whatever reason, somehow break the inner display, then I have the outer display that I could use 100% of the time. And if I just so happen to break both the inner and outer screen of the Z Fold 6, first thing I'm going to tell myself is the fact that I don't need to be having such an expensive phone. And then also I need to invest into insurance. But I digress. So if I do break the outer and inner screen, Samsung has what they call as Samsung DeX. And that essentially turns your smartphone into a computer. All you have to do is hook up an HDMI to USB-C wire into the bottom port of your Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6, hook that HDMI wire into a monitor, a TV, a portable something, maybe some AR glasses, and you're able to still use this phone. So even if you break both displays on this phone, it's still going to be a phone that you can still use as a computer via Samsung DeX. Keep watching because we're almost to the point where I'm gonna let you know if this phone is worth your money. So now let's talk about accessories for this phone. I personally don't use this phone with a case because I feel like it gets too bulky. It takes away from that one-handed usability. However, there are plenty of cases out there that people will purchase to cover up the hinge, obviously to just add general protection. But I found out, and I feel like I personally stand divided on those types of cases because of the fact that a lot of these case makers will have a phone that's too bulky and then adds too much protection, or too thin and doesn't really add protection. And so I feel like there isn't any happy medium there. And that's why I just continue to use this phone without a case. And yes, I do have insurance. Samsung does allow for the infamous S Pen to be used on the inner display only. So if you're one of those people who like to write notes down and kind of put it on your phone, kind of like the S24, 23, 22 series and the Note series from Samsung, you can have an S Pen on the inner display. And do know that it is a very specific S Pen. You can't just take your S24 Ultra S Pen and write on this phone because it doesn't work. And so that's one of the accessories that I wish Samsung would implement or integrate into the next Z Fold series, is a built-in S Pen feature, so that way I don't have to carry a case which then houses the S Pen. It's just all going to be integrated like the Samsung Galaxy S24 series or the Samsung Note series for those of you who remember it. So the speakers here are plenty loud for what I need them to. So again, we have two speakers, one at the top here and one at the bottom. And honestly, I never really used the speakers that are built in. I usually have a pair of my headphones on or my earbuds on. So as we wrap up this video, we're trying to figure out who is this phablet for. It's going to be for those people who are bored with the traditional smartphones. If you have an iPhone, which their design hasn't really changed in the last 10 years, or maybe you have a Samsung phone, which is starting to stagnate in terms of just innovation. The Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6 takes a step in the right direction with trying to innovate. It's not innovating as fast as other competitors like the Pixel 9 Pro Fold or some of the other Chinese foldable phones overseas, but in the United States, I feel like this phone is the best folding phone out there. Pixel Fold users, don't blow me up. This is just my personal opinion. Honestly, this phone isn't for everyone unless you have really deep pockets or a really nice bank account, because this phone comes in at just under 2,000 USD. Meaning that it's a very expensive phone with some outdated qualities. But if you're hellbent on getting a Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6, they offer some really good trade-in values up towards their Samsung phones, especially when they're trying to promote the purchase of their new phone. So for instance, when the Z Fold 7 comes out later this year in 2025, they're probably going to have some really good trade-in incentives whenever you trade in a Z Fold 4, a Z Fold 5, a Z Fold 6 towards their Z Fold 7 device. So after having used the Z Fold 6 series for the last 6 months, would I recommend it to you? Honestly, no. It's too expensive. The cameras are not where it needs to be. I feel like Samsung trolled us with the cameras because, again, the cameras are good, but for the price point, they need to be better. And so if you've heard of the term old but gold, well, with the cameras, it's going to be old but trolled because, again, Samsung really needs to update these cameras. Price is just so expensive, and the design language, while it has been modernized with more of a squared off design, Samsung seems to have stagnated itself with innovation, and it's not really competing with other phones in the foldable market. And honestly, I think about trading this phone in pretty regularly because of the narrow display. I honestly just, I miss the regular form factor of a traditional smartphone because of the fact that I'm more accurate with my typing and texting and just the regular aspect ratio without having to open up this particular display. Because when you first get the phone, you think you're going to open up this display all the time. I actually don't. I actually use the phone like this in its closed form about 98% of the time. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed my 6-month review of the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6. If I was going to put a numeric value to the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6, I would give it a number of, I don't know, 6.7 out of 10. I'll see you in the next one.